Okay, we had a few technical difficulties with the last live stream. We've had some random internet issues, but we're back. So, a lot to discuss. A hell of a lot to discuss actually in the world of sport. Very fast, fluid situation with Newcastle United with the appointment of Steve Bruce, and Sheffield Wednesday are now looking very likely to get Chris Hughton in as their new manager, although Nigel Pearson is also in the running. The Newcastle United situation, well, I've been following the Newcastle United story very, very closely since the channel came about, since I decided to go into make this a sports channel about 2.5 years ago. I've basically been following the Newcastle United story very, very closely. There's a lot going on there. It's a very complex issue. Now, it doesn't matter who Mike Ashley appointed as manager, they're going to face the same issues that Rafa Benitez has faced, and whoever they appointed most likely would be a downgrade, and Steve Bruce is a massive downgrade. Steve Bruce is not the problem. Mike Ashley and his ownership is the problem here. And, you know, what we've seen, that the vitriol we have seen on social media, fans have had enough. As soon as Rafa Benitez was not offered the long-term extension that he sought, he wasn't really after money. He was after a long-term extension so he could build an identity with that football club and build a squad that was able to compete and be solid in the Premier League, rather than fighting relegation battles all the time to look up the table. Fans were upset, is the polite way to go about things. What has since happened in the last week, from Steve Bruce being linked to the job, to him saying the clubs are dealing with the negotiations, to him suddenly on Monday resigning, to today being hired, it's been handled very badly, and it's left a real nasty taste in the mouths of Sheffield United fans, Sheffield Wednesday fans. Sorry, not Sheffield United. Sheffield United are in the Premier League now. Sheffield Wednesday fans are furious, and I think Newcastle United fans have reached a point now where we could expect, on the first day, this is the first home game of the season in August, there to be an empty St James's Park. And when that happens, there has to be this has to be the tipping point. The 3 attempts at takeovers that have failed. The club has been up for sale for over 2 years now, and it's going to get to a point where this cannot continue. The club is up for sale. The uncertainty is there. Steve Bruce, well, I understand why he's taken the job, and I can sort of understand why he resigned as Sheffield Wednesday manager. The way it was handled when he resigned from Sheffield Wednesday was absolutely diabolical. It's come across in completely the wrong way, and fans are rightly angry. But the media have put a spin on it, and the situation has become so toxic that I think this is the tipping point now. I think the fans have finally, as a group in Newcastle, decided enough is enough, and they want him gone. One thing I would hope that would happen is enough people in the Newcastle area came together and bought the club as a massive group of people off Mike Ashley, and put it into fan ownership or fan board ownership. I think we've reached a point now where the FA, Premier League and Football League, has allowed this to continue with this shocking ownership for so long that it's a much wider issue than Newcastle, but it's such a toxic situation, and no one, absolutely no one, is talking about the ongoing tax fraud investigation that involves Newcastle United. That's not being discussed in the mainstream media, and that is a massive sticking point for any potential buyer. Mike Ashley is liable for that tax fraud, and I've made Exeter City down in League Two has fan ownership and has done for over a decade now. They're the only club that I can think of that has the fans as stakeholders, and they are a well-run club. Yes, they're at one in the lower levels of the football pyramid, but they are fan-owned. There's a huge stake at the club owned by the fans, and the club turns a profit. The club can now afford to revamp their stadium. The club can afford to budget accordingly. They're not overspending. They're living within their means. It is doable. And I don't understand why more clubs don't go down this route. The issue with football club ownership in the UK, because I know you're in Australia, but in the UK is a long-standing problem. The FA, the Premier League, and the Football League have proven themselves to be poor in the regards of regulating who buys football clubs, who runs football clubs, where the money comes from. They have shown themselves to be not fit for purpose in this area, and it's allowed a situation to occur where clubs are being run into the ground. Unscrupulous owners are bleeding clubs dry. Look at Mike Ashley, for example. He's lined his own pockets off the back of the football club. And all I see is a club in crisis. And there are many other clubs that are in a similar position up and down the football pyramid, from the Premier League down to the non-league now. And I don't know when it will end. There has to become a point where enough fans say enough is enough. And I think the Newcastle United situation could be a tipping point, but other clubs are getting close. And it shows how weak the FA, the Football League, and the Premier League have been in club governance for a long time. It's reaching a point now where it is unsustainable. I've long argued on this channel and discussed the pros and cons of a salary cap or a spend cap. And for some reason, European football refuses to implement a cap system. And very few clubs actually turn a profit. Very, very few. The money is not equally distributed from the TV deal that we currently have, plus the new one that's coming into force. And there is a massive imbalance. It's going to be interesting to see what happens in the next coming years. It's going to be interesting to see what happens when Sky goes through its restructuring process, when the next round of TV deals come up, when Comcast restructures Sky, and what happens going forward. It was very interesting that the Cricket World Cup final suddenly went to free-to-air TV as well as on Sky. I find that very interesting. Had England lost the semi-final against Australia, they would have kept that behind the Sky Sports paywall. And that could have been just as equally an entertaining final as England-New Zealand was. So sports TV rights are a massive talking point. People are switching off subscription TV and pay-per-view sport, and a lot of people are illegally streaming. And the TV companies, especially Sky and BT, have to realise that this is unsustainable for them, because they're angering their potential customers by ripping them off. Who do I think wins the Scottish Premiership next season? I think it's open. I honestly believe that is an the most open Premiership we could see. I think with Kilmarnock, I know they've lost Steve Clarke, but they would have been compensated for his departure. I think Rangers with Gerrard. Aberdeen will be upset that they slipped below Kilmarnock in the table. I think Celtic are declining, and I think it's anyone's game. I honestly do. I think it's going to be a more competitive Scottish Premiership this season than last season, and that was good fun to watch for the majority. I think it's anyone's game at this point. It's going to be interesting to see who does come out on top. I don't think Celtic can sustain it all for much longer. I really think the gap has closed, and I think with how Kilmarnock and Rangers and Aberdeen to a point, and Hearts, the early leaders, I think anything's possible in the coming season. I think it's open, very open, and I can't definitely say this team is going to win it, but I think we could have a surprise in there come the end of next season. But we'll have to wait and see what happens. We'll have to wait and see, obviously, what teams finish where, what actually happens with Celtic under Neil Lennon. Will their style of football change? What's going to happen with Rangers under Gerrard? Will they continue to progress? What Kilmarnock do now that Steve Clarke has moved on? Can Hearts be more sustained in their title challenge next season rather than tail off? Can they keep up the winning under Craig Levein? So it's going to be interesting to see. I think Aberdeen will be annoyed that they slip back. I think so. There's a lot going on here. I think there's about 5 teams. You could throw St Johnstone in there to make 6 teams that have a chance. So that's going to be an interesting one going forward. But I think it's this time of the year where pre-seasons and European qualification games are taking place. It's, I think, too early to really say a team is going to win. Obviously, Celtic are the bookies' favourites, but I think it could be even more open than last year. And last year was good fun to see how competitive it was, and the fact that 4 different teams led the SPL, and you had, I think, 7 different teams got into the top 4 at one point. So it was a lot of fun following it. And let's see what happens in the coming season. I think it's going to be interesting to see if Celtic can sustain their winning run. And it's going to be interesting if Celtic can actually maintain the services of some of their better players. I think because of the UEFA coefficient and because of their failure in Europe last season, that's going to have a knock-on effect. It is. And it's going to be interesting to see how that affects things going forward for all Scottish clubs, not just Celtic. So it's going to be interesting. But back onto the topic that I was on about fan ownership. It is a hot topic. It's more of a German system, to be fair, and Mediterranean style system where fans have a say in the running of a club with shares in the club. It's a pretty alien system to the UK, although Exeter City do have a significant proportion of the ownership in a fan's stake. And that leads me on to spending in football and should there be a salary cap and or a spend cap on clubs. Football is a sport that is very resistant to controlling cost, very resistant, and we're seeing so many clubs financially in difficulty right now. Not just in the UK, but across Europe. It is a worrying trend. How long will the money bubble continue? When will the bubble burst? Because we've had several recessions in the last 30 years, be it nationally or Europe-wide or internationally. Yet football keeps making money somehow, and the wages keep increasing massively. And what an average player now earns in a week used to be the average salary for a year. So something's gone horribly wrong along the way. I think the TV deals have helped fuel the over-inflated salaries and transfers. I think fans are starting to have enough of high ticket prices, high prices for TV. A lot of fans illegally stream anyway that can't get to games. And the greed is killing it. Absolutely. The greed is killing the game. And we're now starting to see that creep into the women's game where they're demanding equal pay. And if they were to get equal pay on a similar level to the men, the women's game is bankrupt immediately. And I think this is where we need to say, look, the quality level that you produce, the quality product you put out is not at the same level as the men's product and never will be. You have to live within your means. And I think these entitled, and they are entitled, I don't know how to put this without coming across as an arsehole, but I do think that some in the women's game feel that they're entitled to it and they're not. I think until the women's game can become more profitable as it is, with the current structures that are in place, with the green shoots of professionalism, they can't demand equal pay yet. While I think they deserve to be paid more for their efforts, I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens when it comes to European football, or association football, as we should call it technically, to see if they can start bringing the cost down and controlling the issues that beset it, which is the greed. There is a reason why Qatar got the World Cup, and that's because of corruption and greed. And FIFA, UEFA, and then the FA, in that kind of order, or just generally the governing bodies of the sport from FIFA downwards, have failed the sport for a very long time and have allowed the clubs and the players to get too greedy. Kawhi Leonard, how does he win a regular season? Does he win a regular season MVP? I don't follow the NBA, so therefore, while I kept an eye on the Toronto Raptors and how they did, the fact they only stayed for one season and buggered off, that's not a good sign for the Raptors long term if they want to repeat what they did this year, if they want to continue to be a successful team and continue to grow the sport in Canada. Does he win a regular season MVP? A championship team is more than one player, but you could say without him, do they make the playoffs? Probably not. But at the same time, did they win just because of him? No, they won because it was a team effort, and every single player on that squad and in that bought in to what the Raptors were doing in the last season. And you don't win a championship with a single player win a championship. It's a team effort. Was he the most valuable player? Yeah, probably he was. Yes. The fact that Toronto failed to re-sign him is a worrying sign for the longevity of the NBA in Canada. If the Raptors are to remain at that level, they needed to keep him, and I think that's going to be more difficult for them to stay in the playoff race and the playoff mix in the years going forward. And the NBA needs to seriously consider how they improve the quality of facilities of basketball in Canada as well. The long term, it's like the Olympic legacy here in the UK with the London Olympics, is not only do you want to have a great championship win, I mean, any team that wins a championship deserves to be praised. And building a community and building a fan base, but they're going to find it harder to do so with the fact that their best player is gone. It's the way that was handled and the way that came about in the end was not great, and I don't think it's going to help the team long term to stay at that level when the best player has a season, wins the trophy, and goes, bye guys. He's seen Toronto as a stepping stone, and therefore I find it harder to like players like that who think of themselves before the team. I prefer players in team sports who are team guys. They're the ones that deserve the accolades as most valuable players to me. When they get too big for their boots and move off and use it as a stepping stone, I think that, in my mind, that in my personal opinion, that damages my opinion of certain players, and it's happened in a variety of sports where I think certain players have used a team as a stepping stone, or they haven't shown enough loyalty to a team that has brought them along, and it's a difficult one. But I don't know how they vote for league MVP, playoff MVP, most gentlemanly conduct. I mean, each professional league has its own way of voting for players' awards, the individual awards for players, for like most charitable or cleanest player, player with most valuable player, things like that. But it will how the NFL. The NFL already has the interest here. There's a reason why the London series has grown to the fact that they're going to be using their third major stadium with the new rebuild of White Hart Lane in the UK. I think the fan base is already here, and it has been here for a long time. The NFL does have a decent TV deal with UK networks. There is a good media link. There's a lot of interest. There's a lot of Americans who live in the UK, which I think helps, sell the product. But the issue over the London-based franchise, for example, is when they came along with the London series in 2007, the plan was that a decade later we would have a team. It's now 12 years later. We don't have a team. The failed attempt by Sahih Khan to buy Wembley, which pissed off a lot of people over here, and also his poor running of Fulham and the corruption allegations around that, I think has dented those hopes as well. We're not sure what's going to happen economically and politically with what's going on with the Brexit situation. Yes, politics and sport has become entwined here. The fact that they have been coming in now for 12 years and they've been growing the series is one thing, but to transplant a team when you've got 30 fan bases here in the UK that support all 30 teams, and to put a team here, the most likely team is Jacksonville, and Jacksonville is not a very good team. And if you want to have a fan base here and have a franchise here, you're going to have to get the other fans of the other 29 teams to be willing to support Jacksonville in reincarnated, if that was to be the case, and to get behind a team that doesn't win a lot. And that is really bad. And I don't think they're going to want to stick around watching a team getting battered day in, day out, because that's pretty much what Jacksonville have been for most of their history. They've only had, I think, one winning season in the last however long. Like 2 years ago, they had a winning season where they actually got over 500. So I don't know. And I think Sahih Khan has burnt his bridges with a lot of people. I think he's burnt his bridges the NFL did want to have a team here by 2017, 2020, that kind of period. We've already in 2019. And when the NBA came last season with the Boston Celtics a couple of years ago, and they asked the Boston Celtics CEO, who also happens to own Liverpool, the guy who owns the Boston Celtics, and Boston Red Sox, the Fenway Sports Group own a lot of things, and they're linked, whatever. And they asked him, like, when will the UK or will Europe have a major league franchise at any point? And he goes, no, not now. Economically, things have changed. Economically, things have changed from where they were a decade ago. And that is true. The financial crisis has affected things. And I'm not sure if the British sporting public have had enough of being ripped off for ticket prices. If you look at the vitriol that came after the Europa League and Champions League finals with the price of tickets and how fans were being mugged off, and they just were like, no, we're not paying this, and they boycotted the Europa League final. Half the tickets went unsold. That tells you what you need to know. I think that my friend Ollie has been to almost every NFL game at Wembley. He doesn't go anymore, and he's an accountant. He's a commercial accountant. He works in London, in the city, and he pays a lot of money. And he gets paid a big salary. He gets paid a lot of money. He can't afford to keep going to watch the NFL in London anymore. He's been going for 4 or 5 years solidly. He's been to every game for the last 4 or 5 years. And this year he goes, no, I can't do it this year. I'm not doing it anymore. I can't. And he gets paid well above the average salary for this country. He has a nice car. He has a nice house. But he goes, it's unsustainable for me to go to 4 games a season. I cannot afford it. So I think that's where an NFL franchise here in the UK is going to struggle. If a hardcore fan who has been to 4 or 5 years worth of NFL games in London says, "Now I can't afford it anymore," when he's on a mega buck salary, that tells you that the NFL have got the pricing wrong. Major League Baseball. The criticism that Major League Baseball had thrown at them was they didn't have enough cheap tickets and there were too many overpriced tickets. The cheap tickets, there weren't enough of them. And the top range tickets, there were too many, and they were double the price of Fenway Park or Yankee Stadium. So again, ticket price when they come over here with their major league franchises for a one-off game, brilliant. But to have a regular season, fans won't turn up. Not for the amount of money they've been asked to part company with. And we're already seeing with our domestic sports, especially the Premier League, fans have had enough of the ticket price, and that's at a far lower level than what the NFL charge for tickets, and they're just not willing to pay the money. And the fact that 30% of both games that went of the crowd that were at the London Stadium for the Major League Baseball were overseas, basically American tourists or expats, tells you that not everyone there was British, basically, and local. And the ticket price was too high, and that was a big sticking point. The way it was marketed wasn't great either. There wasn't a lot of advertising for it. The adverts that were there on social media or on the internet involved Jimmy Carr, and Jimmy Carr is possibly the worst option they could have had to advertise a sporting event. The guy is a very divisive figure, very divisive, not very popular. He's avoided paying tax. He's been caught out in a tax avoidance scheme. Yes, he paid the money back, but there's still question marks over his tax arrangements. And to have something like Major League Baseball come so late to the party, and I did a video on it, and I looked at when the other major leagues came to the UK or Europe. The NHL came first came here in 1938. The NBA first came here in 1992, I believe, and the NFL have been coming here since 2007. So I think the Major League Baseball needs to make some serious improvements. They need to find better TV deal. I think BT Sport is a massive mistake because hardly anyone watches BT Sport. So the viewership on that would have been really low. The fact it was on the BBC website, okay, but not everyone wants to have a BBC account because a lot of people aren't happy with the way the BBC's run at the moment. So they need to find a broadcaster that that will be a workable one. They played safe with the teams that played, the Red Sox and the Yankees, and next year, again, the Cardinals and I think the Cardinals and I can't remember who the other team is. They played safe with the 2 years they've signed the deal. The time zone isn't a big, massive issue. 5 hours from the east coast of the US to here is not the end of the world. It'd be early morning TV. It'd be morning TV rather than evening TV for the American ones, which not necessarily a bad thing on a weekend. But the ticket price was too high. The teams they chose were too safe. Very, very safe in their choice of teams. They played it safe rather than actually take a risk on a team right now that's up and coming and winning games. I know the Yankees and the Red Sox are two of the best teams at the moment, but they did play safe, and they've played safe with next year's teams as well. The marketing has to be better. They have to advertise far better than what they were. I was very critical about the Cricket World Cup as well with their advertising. The only time I saw adverts for it was when the final was actually on. Because Sky Sports had the rights solely until the Cricket World Cup final. Again, advertising was poor, and I think there's a change in culture now with how we in the UK consume our televised sport. I think more and more people want it on free-to-air TV again. They're not happy with Sky prices and the quality of Sky anymore. I think Sky's run its course. BT's been nothing but a disaster. Premier Sports have come up with the idea of having the free sports channel. And I think that's, starting to make Sky and BT think we might have to go free to air with our sports channels eventually, because you look at the Cricket World Cup final, about 9 million people watched that, and most of them watched it on Channel 4. Most of them watched it on Channel 4. And a lot of people are not very happy with the fact that international sport and cricket in general and things like that have been taken off free to air TV, and the viewership's fallen, the participation's fallen, and the crowds have fallen. Put it on free-to-air TV, participation goes up. It's a no-brainer. When I was my brother's age, I could name the entire England cricket team, the entire Australian team, the entire South African team. This is the thing. Other countries decide, no, this is staying free-to-air. We're not going with subscription only. We have to have dual rights as a minimum. And I think that should be the way to go. Give people choice. If they want to pay to be ripped off 30 quid a month, let them. If they want it on free to air, you should give that opportunity as well. There's a reason why a lot of sports fans illegally stream stuff. They've had enough of being ripped off by the big sports TV companies. And now Amazon are getting in on the sports action, and people just are skeptical about their Prime accounts going through the roof. They just don't want to do it anymore. Because wages haven't risen in the last 10 years as much as prices have. And the fact that for some reason, sport's done really well in the last decade, whereas the average person is struggling to get by. There's a culture shift in how we want to do it. Sports fans, I think, are saying enough's enough, and they have to seriously consider that their potential customers and the customers they have are getting to the point where, we're turning against this. I'm surprised in India cricket is not free to air, but I know in real terms, if I was to pay what you guys pay, I'll be paying like a pound a month. So, and because of the size of population in India, they can easily make a profit on the TV revenue. But again, India is not necessarily the richest country in the world, and a lot of people don't have a lot of money. They've got to be very, very careful how they go about it, because if it ends up like it's ended up here in the UK with fans being seriously disheartened and pissed off, and I'm basically just fed up with being ripped off. Basically, it's been an ongoing thing, and it's happening more and more, and we're not feeling the benefits of what supposedly subscription TV was meant to give sport. And if anything, it's created more negatives. And now we're at a tipping point, and I fear that if we go too far one way, that it could be more damaging than growth related. I think it could take a whole generation for professional sport in this country and around the world to recover, because I do honestly believe we're reaching a point now where the bubble will burst. And because fans are just not willing to pay the money anymore, they've reached a point where the ticket price as it is already too high, and now the TV companies are right. I mean, look, the Premier League clubs could let us in for free or for a tenner a ticket and make a massive profit. The fact they choose to have tickets as high as 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100 quid, tell you what you need to know about the greed of the football in this country. But other sports are starting to go the same route, and I do honestly fear for the longevity of sports as it currently stands. I do. And we'll have to see what happens in the coming years when the next TV deals are up for negotiation with the restructuring that Sky Sports will have under Comcast. It's going to be interesting. But at the same time, I do honestly have concerns about the direction sport is taking, and how sustainable it's going to be, because wages are just not going up fast enough. And as someone who works full time and does this, I know what it's like to look at your paycheck and go, oh, okay, that's an outlay. That's a couple hundred quid got to go out. And, it's just not sustainable. And I found websites where I can watch sport for free, legal or otherwise, and people are doing it. They're not willing to pay anymore. I mean, I can actually watch the NRL for about 100 odd quid a year through a website called Watch NRL, which is part of the media rights package that the NRL has with domestic and overseas. You have to be living outside of Australia and New Zealand, and you can get it. I haven't got it at the moment because I'm in the process of planning to move house and get my new flat. But the fact that it's a lot cheaper than paying for Sky Sports, £120 a year over 30 quid a month. You work that out. 30 times 12 or 120 for the whole year. Work out how much it actually costs. You'll be stunned how much Sky Sports and BT Sport basically, how do I put it? They've overinflated their own prices. Yes, you can go to prison for you can't go to prison for streaming yourself or find the website that hosts it, but the host or the person who's showing it to a crowded pub, for example, can. But to be brutally honest, very few have actually been prosecuted. The courts just do not want to deal with it because it's basically a breach of contract. And a commercial contract's more civil, but I think only a handful have gone to prison. Only a handful. The courts just don't want to deal with it. But you've got to imagine the people getting the end product, they're the ones that are pissed off with having to pay through the nose. This is why I think a Major League franchise wouldn't work in the UK, for one. This is why Major League Baseball definitely got its figures wrong and got its marketing wrong. We'll have to see what happens next year with Major League Baseball. The NHL, there were plans 20 odd years ago to have a 10-team like NHL division here in Europe and make it a 40-team league. Yeah, no, not going to happen. It's not going to happen. It's just the travel alone is going to be a problem. The fact that if it's a US or North American based league, the salaries are paid in dollars, and the exchange rate fluctuates. So that's something to consider. The fact that we have a higher tax rate and you have to pay your tax. So you have to convert your dollars to pounds, and then you've got to pay a higher tax rate as a higher earner. And then you've got to factor in the fact that property costs more in this country. It doesn't necessarily bode well. It doesn't necessarily bode well. But at the same time, I don't know. I don't know where we go from here, but there are certain sports that I like. And for me, I find that Sky Sports and BT Sport are basically destroying the sport, because the amount of money that's gone in and the fact that the players now are demanding more and more in higher salaries. At the end of the day, the fan pays for it. The TV money should cover, any TV deal should cover a league to allow fans to get in very cheap, but the teams want to make as much profit as possible. And the players are greedy, and the teams are greedy, and the leagues are greedy. And it's going to bite them one day. Well, what have we got? The NHL does have a big following in Germany. It does. And Hamburg used to have a very, very good team called the Freezers that played in the DEL. They've gone out of business because they were owned by the same team, the same person who owns the Ice Bears of Berlin. But the Hamburg Freezers were my German team until they went out of business a couple of years ago. They had the best logo as well, with the hockey mask with the frozen tear. But they've gone out of. They've been mothballed because it became too expensive to own two teams in the same league. But no, Germany does have a big hockey, and especially an NHL following, with players like Leon Draisaitl and Grubauer playing in the NHL, and that helps sell a sport when you've got some of the best players in the NHL come from Germany. I haven't been watching the netball World Cup. Netball, basketball, those kind of sports aren't really sports that I enjoy watching. They're too high scoring. They are too high scoring, if you get what I mean. I'd rather see lower scoring sports. I also think the BBC are overdoing it with the women's sport. While I understand that it's a World Cup and England have a very good chance of winning another World Cup in a couple of weeks, I think they are overdoing it when there are other sports that are more undervalued that could get better TV coverage. They're putting a lot of emphasis on the Women's World Cup football and netball, yet we can't watch the golf, which used to be a staple part of my viewing, was the Open and Augusta Masters, and now we get piss poor coverage on that because the BBC have lost all the golf rights to Sky, which has actually damaged the sport. But that's again that's my personal view on that. I think they are overdoing it a little bit, and netball is a very niche sport. It really is. But look, the BBC are going with this. They are going with this tick box PC agenda. It doesn't help anyone. But yes, it is a World Cup, and yes, England have a very, very good chance. But you're not getting the same abuse towards the netball players that you were getting towards the female football players. And I find that really weird. I do find that absolutely strange that women playing football, no, they can't do that. They're crap. Women playing netball, good luck to them. I find that bizarre. I do. But I'm not a fan of basketball, which is, obviously the men's version. Although women play basketball, I'm not a fan of netball. I've got lots of female friends. They have played it, but I'm just didn't follow. I didn't ever enjoy basketball, and while I've got friends who do play netball and have played netball, again, it's not something that I enjoy watching. It's too high scoring. Sky Sports is now owned by Comcast, which is an American company. So we've gone from an Australian media baron to a US conglomerate, which is just as bad as BT is here for internet speed. So Sky internet speeds will drop, their customer service will go down the toilet, and your bills will go up. I'm really going to be interested to see how Comcast restructure Sky. If they get it wrong, they could kill. They could cause carnage for professional sport in this country. I wasn't necessarily an audience on it. I just wanted to watch the cricket. The F1 has lost all appeal for me, and it's the only live race of the year, and it's Silverstone, which is a shit racing circuit. Not gonna lie. As a fan of the British touring cars and the world and British superbikes, I will tell you now, Silverstone is an appalling circuit. The modifications they made and the tarmac surface are shocking. If it rains, as the MotoGP found out last year, you can't race on it. It becomes basically a massive 3.5 mile puddle, and logistically, where it is, the infrastructure nearby, it cannot cope with a big event anymore. F1 at Silverstone stuck. Well, F1 sucks anyway, but F1 at Silverstone sucks even more. And the result was pretty predictable. Again, the same car, same driver winning. Dull, dull, dull. It might have been an interesting race, but I just wouldn't have no interest in it. The tennis, Djokovic, Federer, two of the best players of all time on grass. Pretty predictable. Yes, it went to an epic 5-setter. Yes, I caught about 5 minutes of it, but the cricket was more fun. Federer and Djokovic have both won Wimbledon before. It's nothing new. Hamilton's won at Silverstone before. Nothing new. England winning a Cricket World Cup never happened before. So I'd rather go with something that neither England nor New Zealand have won the Cricket World Cup. So whoever won on Sunday at Lords would be a first timer, and it was much more fun. I'm sorry, I'd much rather watch 6, 7, 8 hours of cricket than 2 hours of a traffic jam or 4 hours of two European blokes twat a ball of fluff. It's my personal opinion. I think F1 has got issues, and what's interesting is, no, it's just simple. A lot of people don't like my point of view. Oh, but you never raced anything before. Like, I've done a bit of karting in my time and a bit of quad biking. Yay. Yes, I like motorsport. No, I do not like F1. There's a difference. I do like motorsport, but I don't like F1. F1 is very uncompetitive. The prize money is not equally distributed, and a couple of teams basically call the shots when it comes to regulation. So Ferrari, Mercedes, Red Bull. If one of them throw the toys out the pram, they pander to them. The fact that you got the sister teams, like the junior teams that are engine clients, that doesn't help. I think the regulations have got it all wrong. The Pirelli tyres are shit. The drivers have said the tyres and the regulations are crap. The teams, however, don't want to implement the regulations that Ross Brawn, who is now the F1 technical director, wants to bring in. So the big teams are throwing their toys out the pram and therefore delaying any implementation of the new regs that are going to come in 2021. They're not happy. They're not voting in favour of. It's split down the middle. The smaller teams are going, look, we want to have more competitive racing. The bigger teams, like, we want to win all the time. We don't want to share the toys. F1's too political, far too political. It's just politics. And it is... If you put Hamilton in a Sauber, let's see how he does. Or the Alfa Romeo, technically. Let's see how he does in a lesser car. He won't win. And they go, but Valtteri Bottas can't beat him. He's had a fair few poles, and he's actually won a couple of races this season, so he has proven on his day he can. The fact that it's throw the toys out the pram time because Liberty Media want to sort of turn it to a sort of a NASCAR type of level playing field, and the big teams don't want to do it. Fuck F1. F1 is just corporate crap. It has been for 10, 15 years. The fact that Sky now have sole rights after this year, fuck it. Don't care. I ain't paying. Well, Murdoch signed the deal, and now Comcast are honouring it. And Bernie Ecclestone said we signed the deal. Yeah, but here's the thing: Bernie Ecclestone signed the deal that Liberty Media implemented that screwed Silverstone in the first place. Bernie Ecclestone made a lot of money out of that deal, and suddenly now the negative press. Oh no, I must do something. I must say they must change the deal. Ecclestone, fuck off. The guy is a used car salesman by trade, so you shouldn't trust him anyway. He's a grotty tax-avoiding shit. I couldn't care less. He's put F1 in the position that it is now. Liberty Media, they've carried on with agreeing to have it behind a paywall, and that's going to kill the sport. Stone dead. MotoGP is starting to lose fans because it's on BT Sport, so its viewership has dropped considerably. It's a no-brainer. Some of the motorsports are dying because they've been taken off free-to-air TV or made less accessible and more expensive to view, which makes them seem very elitist and a rich man's plaything, which is a shame because the superbikes I like World Superbikes, British Superbikes, they're great fun. I'm lucky my friend has Eurosport because Eurosport used to be on Freeview, it used to be on free-to-air TV. They took that away from us about 10 years ago. Eurosport went down the same route as BT Sport, taking it off free-to-air TV, put it behind a paywall. And yeah, this is where I think sport has got things wrong, and the TV companies have got too greedy, and the sports have got too greedy, and the fan at the end of the day is the one who's getting ripped off. Straight talking is the way to be because so many YouTubers out there are like, oh yeah, and they don't have the balls to say how they feel. They're being too PC. I hate the political correctness. I hate the Tickbox brigade. I hate the fact that the Twitter abuse, the online abuse sports stars get. Well, I'm not a fan of Lewis Hamilton, partly because he claims Stevenage is a slum and a ghetto, which is a load of BS because it's just a middle-class town right next to where all the F1 factories are, ironically. Great way to slag off your local fan base. It's a commuter town. It's not a slum. It's a bit dull. There's a fair bit to do in the area, but not much. It's not great. It's an overspill town. Yay. What an arse. Oh, yeah, but Darlington Park was turned into a complete shambles because the people who actually wanted to do it were doing it on credit. And they didn't actually have the funds. They were doing it on the basis that they would make a profit. And in the end, they got rid of the Dunlop Bridge. So the most iconic thing about Donington is gone. They started selling bits of the Dunlop Bridge off to pay for the track refurb. The new owners who come in have scrapped that track refurb and gone back to the original format of the old GP and national circuit. You didn't need to do anything to Donington. You just had to put some new stands up and some new parking and improve some of the infrastructure around the track. That's all they had to do. And they were trying to completely redo the layout and completely change the track. And they got rid of the Dunlop Bridge. The biggest selling point about Donington was the Dunlop Bridge. And it's gone. So that's all you need to know about Donington, the big foul up there. And Donington, unfortunately, it's taken years to recover. It's starting to turn a profit again, but the damage was done back in 2008. Silverstone should not be hosting Grand Prix racing now. It is not a suitable track. It is an absolutely appalling circuit. The facilities are shocking. When it rains, it just turns into a mud bath. The infrastructure around Silverstone is just non-existent, and it's in the middle of fucking nowhere. I hate Silverstone with a passion. How anyone can like that circuit is beyond me. It is a terrible circuit. The new layout is just a mess, and there's no soul to it anymore. That new pit lane, and they changed the start where the start finish line is. Stop fiddling with stuff. Don't fix what isn't broken. They've made it worse. It was already an average track to begin with. They've made it worse. I'd much rather see the F1 or the MotoGP at Brands Hatch or Donington or Thruxton. If Thruxton got the funding to refurb it and bring it up to Grand Prix standard, that would be an amazing track to have the MotoGP, World Superbikes, and the F1 at. But it's Thruxton, and again, it's in rural Berkshire, Hampshire. It's not really. It did in the past. It did in the 80s. That's why you got the GP circuit, which is 3.25 miles long, something like that. The Grand Prix circuit, which is the longer, configuration. The Indy circuit's crap. I can't stand the Indy circuit, but the Grand Prix circuit at Brands Hatch is absolutely amazing. I love watching the touring cars and the superbikes. When the superbikes and touring cars are at Brands Hatch, the GP circuit is a car and bike breaker. It is a challenging, not twisty, but a challenging circuit with some good straights where you can get some good speed, some good overtaking spots. So it's very flowing circuit. Donington, Thruxton, all flowing circuits. All they needed to do is improve the infrastructure around each individual circuit. And do I like Snetterton? I'm not a big fan of how they've changed certain bits of Snetterton, but my cousin lives locally to Snetterton. The long straights are again, you can get some good speed up, and there are some good overtaking points. And the bomb hole corner, that's an iconic corner. You could not level that out. That's a anti-camber apex. There's a reason why it's called the bomb hole. A bomb fell there in World War II because it's an old airfield. So the circuit's pretty flat, and apart from the bomb hole, which is a massive elevation change of about 4.5, 5 foot, where you just dip in and dip out. The rest of the circuit's completely flat because it's an airfield, or used to be. I love Snetterton. I'm not keen on some of the changes they've done to the track layout over the last 20 years, but at the same time, one of my favourites. But for me, Thruxton's my favourite. Thruxton is the most dangerous circuit in the UK. It's got the highest average speed, and it is a killer. If they made some tweaks to it, I think that could be a Grand Prix circuit. But the superbikes, when the superbikes are at Thruxton, they're flying. When the touring cars are at Thruxton, they are hitting 135 average round a lap. That's your average speed. When you clock all the corners and all your speed traps, you're doing about 135 mile an hour average. I'm going for Chris Hughton, his favourite. Nigel Pearson's second favourite, but Nigel Pearson, I think, would be a downgrade on Bruce. I think Hughton's an upgrade on Bruce. But Sheffield Wednesday allowed themselves to get in this position by allowing the negotiations to carry on as long as they did with Bruce and Newcastle. And then Steve Bruce took it out of their hands. They've lost the compensation. But now Sheffield Wednesday are kicking off about Newcastle hiring Steve Bruce. So there's still more to rumble on about this whole piss take of a mess that is the Steve Bruce, Newcastle United, Sheffield Wednesday saga that has been going on for years. Sheffield Wednesday have been, I wouldn't say, I think he's an average manager. He's hardworking, solid. He's not outstanding. But it doesn't matter who goes into the Newcastle job. It's the owner that's the problem. The owners run the club to the death. The youth setup needs massive investment. The The academy needs massive reinvestment and refurbishment. The fact that they've sold more players than they've bought in real terms financially, they've made a net gain in the transfer market financially. So they're not buying players, they're not developing players, they can't keep players. The fact that Rafa Benitez, couldn't get a contract extension that they've given Steve Bruce, if you know what I mean. I don't know. I honestly don't know what's going on with football. Why do they see? Because they're available, and if you've got a fan manager who's available, who's available to get in the hot seat, you hire them because you don't have to pay a compensation fee to another club to get him out of a contract, and they just recycle them. They just get recycled. It's the problem that you've got this generation of managers that, because Sir Alex Ferguson was winning everything and Arsene Wenger winning everything in the 90s and the 2000s, that when they were at their peak of their powers, could win trophies had they been given the opportunity at a bigger club. But they're past their sell-by date, but there's not enough young managers coming through to fill the stopgap, basically. There's very few. And a lot of the younger managers are on these long-term contracts, and the clubs don't want to get rid of them, and they don't want to leave the clubs they're at. Like Eddie Howe, for example, at Bournemouth. He doesn't want to leave Bournemouth. He doesn't. He's happy where he is because he's an ex-Bournemouth player. He's a club man. He don't want to leave. The fans love him. He loves the fans. He loves the club. And regardless where the team finish, they love him. And he doesn't want to leave. Sean Dyche doesn't want to leave Burnley because what he's built there, although he did have a bit of a tricky last 12 months, but what he's built at Burnley, he's now getting players into the England side. And the club don't want to get rid, and he wants to stay. It's a no-brainer. When you've got managers like Eddie Howe and Sean Dyche that don't want to leave the clubs they're at, regardless if someone else is, they go, oh, club's interested. Okay, not interested. And they turn down offers of bigger clubs. That tells you something, that they're happy where they are. And Eddie Howe is now the longest tenured Premier League manager. That tells you all you need to know about Eddie Howe and what he believes he can do with Bournemouth. And he's doing some great things with Bournemouth. So, I don't know, really. I think too many managers are sacked too quickly. That's another stepping stone block in the way of getting young ex-players into management. And I think this is why Eddie Howe has decided to stay at Bournemouth. He's been linked to some bigger clubs and he's turned them down, flat out. At Bournemouth, he's under no pressure. The media speculation is less. There's less media intrusion. He's building something at Bournemouth that I don't think they could replicate with a different manager. He's happy there. He's content there. And the managerial merry-go-round is a block in the way of young ex-players who want to get into management because there's no job security. And that's an issue. Do I think the VAR can work? Well, the FIFA have brought in this new goalkeeper encroachment rule, and the English Premier League has said we're not going to enforce it. So I think VAR hasn't been used properly. I think it hasn't been implemented correctly. It's changed the definitions and the interpretations of offside, handball, deliberate handball. What is offside? Is it interfering in play? All this balls. And it's changing the game, and not necessarily in a good way. If VAR is implemented correctly and has a solid remit that is unchangeable, then yes, it will work. I don't think it's just an English problem. I think it's a general football problem. The Women's World Cup, they experimented these new rules, which they wouldn't have dared do at a men's tournament. And I find that wrong. Absolutely wrong. They brought in some rule variations to experiment on the women because they knew that if they did it to the men's game, the uproar would be such that, it would have, been too controversial. And it caused enough controversy and a lot of it. I think VAR has taken a regressive step. It's gone backwards in how it's been implemented, how the rules have changed. And I think they need to get it right. They need to get it right quickly because other sports are so far ahead when it comes to using technology to help officiate the game. Rugby league, rugby union. Look what I'm wearing here, an NHL jersey, right? Other sports are so far ahead when it comes to video refereeing. Cricket, when there's a run out or an LBW, they refer, it's done quickly. They look, you can hear what the video official is saying to the on-field official. We don't get that in football. They're getting the use of VAR wrong. And it's across the board. Do I think Bournemouth can get into Europe one day? Possibly. I honestly do. I think the gap between third place in the Premier League and the rest is, oh, I've dropped my key on the floor, is closing. And I think it's a more open league now to get into Europe. I think, the gap is closing. If Burnley can get into Europe under Sean Dyche, then Eddie Howe can definitely get Bournemouth into Europe. Oh, fuck myself. But again, it's sky's the limit. If they get it right, they've got a good work ethic and a good team morale at Bournemouth. They may not have the biggest budget, but absolutely, they've been very shrewd in what players they've signed. They get it tactically right. They're solid. They're improving season on season. Absolutely, they can get into Europe. It's just whether when they get into Europe, can they be competitive in Europe because of that lack of European experience as a club? It'll be interesting, but they have got players there who've got that European club football experience. So, absolutely, I think they can get there. Whether they can sustain themselves there is another thing. And the rivalry with Southampton is growing as well because Ralph Husenhartel has improved that team. Eddie Howe, Ralph Husenhartel, two ex-players who are very affable as managers as well. They're they have a good sense of humour. They're very affable with the media. They're very relaxed. They're very calm. They don't do a Mourinho and blame everyone but themselves. They're very open when they made mistakes. That rivalry on the South Coast is growing. And that's going to be fun in the seasons to come with Husenhartel at Southampton and Eddie Howe at Bournemouth. That rivalry could be quite a spicy one and a fun one because I think Southampton will have a bounce back here and I think Bournemouth will continue to improve as they have been every season they've been in the Premier League. But again, it's do I see them? Yes. When will it be? I don't know. It could be this. They could win the FA Cup this season or the League Cup and get Europa or Champions League qualification automatically by doing it. I don't know what's going on with Nottingham Forest, but their owner's a crook. He's been banned from. I think he's been investigated by Greek authorities for criminal activity. I think he's done stuff in Greece when he was there. Nottingham Forest have had 20 years of mismanagement, much like Sheffield Wednesday, much like Newcastle United. Oldham, another example of an ex-Premier League club, chronically and criminally mismanaged. And I don't know enough about the Nottingham Forest situation, but they've been mismanaged off and on the field. They've made some bizarre managerial appointments. They've made some bizarre decisions off the field as well. And it's a symptom of the issues, it's another symptom of the problems about what's going on with English football. And yes, I have talked about Steve Bruce. I've done yet another video on Steve Bruce. I think for such an average manager, he's taken up a lot of videos on this channel from his time at Villa to his time at Sheffield Wednesday to his period at Newcastle. For an average manager, he's taking up a lot of video time. He's a gift that keeps giving. That's 3 jobs in a year he's now had. So Steve Bruce is just, I don't know. I don't know what is going on with Steve Bruce. I think this Newcastle job could be the biggest mistake he's made. I understand why he's taken the job, but at the same time, I think he's made a massive, massive blunder. I think by accepting it, as long as Mike Ashley is the owner. Plus, I think his best days as management are behind him. I think his best days as a manager are behind him. I think he had his best chance to win silverware with Hull when he got into the FA Cup final. If they had won that FA Cup final, how things, how things could have been different for Hull City, where they are now. They're in a bit of trouble themselves. The only major club in the Northeast he hasn't managed is Middlesbrough, and I could put Hartlepool in there. Oh, God. Now my phone's ringing and I can't answer it, so he's going to have to wait. Not answering a phone call at this time. Right, okay, let's have a look. There's a lot of questions coming in. Neil Warnock, I'm not doing a video on Neil Warnock. I'm not going to give him airtime. He's an arsehole. Newcastle, the takeover deal with the cousin of Sheikh Mansour, so Sheikh Khalid. It's a Dubai, I believe. Yeah, it's the Dubai ownership. Nothing is certain, but the fact that it's the 3rd takeover bid that seems to have collapsed in little under a year and a half, there's issues there. A lot of issues with Newcastle United and Mike Ashley's attempts to sell the club. Steve Bruce. No, basically, Steve Bruce informed Sheffield Wednesday that obviously his father had passed away, and it was for personal reasons. So he was happy to be appointed. He put his assistants in charge for a month, and he took over in February. He didn't actually go on holiday; he took some personal gardening leave. Do I think Blackburn will get back in the Premier League? Not with the Venky's as owners. Not with the Venky's as owners. And if we did, we'll be relegated straight away. And that's me being brutally honest. They are clueless. They make Mike Ashley look sane when it comes to football ownership. If we were to get back to the Premier League, they've got to go as owners. Honestly, they've left the club riddled with debt. And I can see us going to administration at some point. They've left us in a very unsustainable position financially. We're in a similar position to Newcastle, except Newcastle don't have the debt. We just have chronic owners. Megan Rapinoe, she's an entitled liberal. She's got this. She's a snowflake, entitled snowflake. Her comments. She makes the US women's team very hard to like. I find her very, very hard to like. She's demanding like equal pay for the women's players. Her demands will bankrupt the women's game. The hand that feeds her, she wants to bankrupt, basically. I don't think she's on the same planet as. No, I don't like Alex Morgan either. She's a petulant, histrionic, likes throwing herself to the floor. There's drawing fouls and then there's acting like the male players, which is something that the women's game hasn't done up to this point. They are characters that I find it hard to like what they achieved, which is a great record. They only lost one game in like 50 or something. I don't like Megan Rapinoe. I don't like Alex Morgan. They make the American team very hard to like. And they had some very likable players on that team, but the team as a whole are quite arrogant, and they came into the tournament going, give us the trophy, basically. Do I like Hope Solo? No. I'm not a big... I mean, she's very intelligent about the sport. She has a lot of intelligence about the sport, but Hope Solo has an off-field track record that if anyone else was to do what she did with beating up her nephew and attacking her sister, they'll be in prison. I'm not a big fan of Hope Solo. The domestic violence, I can't accept that. I can't sit by and say nothing when I've been critical of professional athletes who've broken the law. That if I did what they did, I would be in prison. It's like the Danny Cipriani and the assault allegations, and Ben Stokes. Ben Stokes and Danny Cipriani should both be in prison right now, but because they're rich and famous, they got away with it. It's not right. It's how the system works out. The system favours the wealthy over the poor. But no, she's got issues, clearly. And there's other issues with Hope Solo as well. Ben Stokes broke a guy's face. He got involved in a fight. He basically was out drinking after the third one-day international against the West Indies in 2017 in a Bristol nightclub. And there's different stories circulating about what happened, whether he was a homophobe or he was standing up for two gay men or whether he was giving them homophobe. Anyway, a fight breaks out. And him and Alex Hales got involved with a couple of local lads. The video footage wasn't great. He avoided prison because of what he was charged with, which is a fray, which is a harder case to prove than GBH or ABH. But in my view, he should be still in prison. He should be in prison serving time. He got off very lightly. And to be fair, he shames the sport of cricket. That has already had enough negative headlines over the years. I don't know. The fact that he's also a Kiwi as well, born and bred. I've never really warmed to Ben Stokes. I never liked Kevin Peterson. I'm not a big... It's a difficult one. The fact his dad was opening support New Zealand in the World Cup final as well, I find that interesting. But I've never been a big fan of Ben Stokes. I really haven't. He's got an anger issue. He's got an alcohol problem. And no one wants to talk about it. No one's got the balls to go, oh, bless. They're all like, oh, bless. No, he's an arsehole. He deserved to be stripped of his England place and should never have played for England ever again. But the ECB going, oh, he's our best player. They made it so he could get back into the team straight away. And Alex Hales, he's been suspended several times for drug misuse and keeps repeating the same mistake. I do not understand why he's given so many chances. I really, I'm the type of guy. Yeah, okay, give someone another chance. Yeah, but if they repeat it again, they can do one. They can just jog on. I'm getting tired of these sports stars regularly. Like Zach Hardacre. How many times has he been given a second chance? You know, I've just found out that two of my friends have died in the last couple of weeks due to drug related deaths. And this is what pisses me off when these superstar athletes who are role models are pissing about with cocaine and alcohol and speed and whatever, and they're not reprimanded for it. They're not, and the bad behaviour is rewarded, and they're allowed so many chances, and they keep repeating the same mistakes. So that's my view on that. I'm going to get very cynical about it and not very happy about it, but it is what it is. Am I looking forward to the Rugby World Cup? Yes and no. I won't be able to watch a lot of it because of the time of day it will be taking place, because of the time difference between here and Japan, and because of my job. I will miss most of the games. I'll be able to watch the games on the weekends, but that's about it. Which is a bugger because I wanted to watch as much of it as possible. But because of the job that I do and the work, my work hours, I'm not going to be able to watch a lot of it. So I'm looking forward to what I can watch, but the weekday games I can't watch because of my work hours. So it's a shame, but I'll try and catch what I can. I think it's going to be a great tournament. There's been some controversy in the build up to the tournament, but every major tournament has this controversy. Every major sporting event has this controversy. It wouldn't be a major sporting event without any controversy, but I think, yeah, it's going to be a shame that I can't watch as much of it as I want to watch. I don't think New Zealand will win it. I don't. I think it's more open than previous tournaments. I think New Zealand have regressed and other teams have closed the gap. I think the Kiwis are all is not well in the Kiwi camp. I think they've peaked. I think they're past their best, and I think this could be the time that they start declining and other teams start closing the gap. But that's my view. I don't think I've picked a winner. I think it's too open at this stage until we've seen all the warm-up games and we've seen the players that are actually finally going on the plane to Japan for all the teams. You cannot say this team's going to win it. Although it is easier to predict a Rugby Union World Cup than a Football World Cup by a lot because you've got the tiering system, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. And there are issues with the Pacific Island nations not being happy with certain things, and the Namibians having some financial issues. Professionalism in rugby union hasn't gone as well as it should have in the last 20 odd years. There are a lot of issues with professionalism in the current sport. A lot of problems, and they've dropped the controversial restructuring of the international calendar, which they just they were saying, oh, it's a perfect idea. It really wasn't. Fans weren't necessarily all sold on it, and the players weren't on board, and the unions couldn't get on board. It only benefited a couple of nations, and that's where you got a problem. It didn't. It was a badly thought through, but a good idea in principle, but badly thought through about how they were going to implement it, and they just could not get people on board. And they're still, and now World Rugby are a bit huffy and puffy because their plans to restructure the international game have been thrown back in their face because they didn't get the implementation, the planning, and the negotiations right with how they were going to do it. They just came up with an idea without really consulting the playing nations, the players, and the fans, and they're the stakeholders. The players who play the game, the countries and leagues that are there, the structured league structure, the national structures, and the fans who will have to obviously, watch their favourite players get injured more often. They weren't consulted enough, and that's where it's flawed. You've got to have some consultation with a direction, and they just didn't do that. But it is what it is. I mean, no idea is perfect when it comes to professional sports. There is no one perfect idea, but some ideas are worse than others, like the Cricket 100 idea. Stupid idea. The only people who want it are the ECB, and the only people coming out in support of it are those on ECB centralised contracts. Every other player that plays the game is against the 100. Fans, for the most part, are against. But they're forging ahead with it regardless. And I think that is a very stupid thing to do. It's actually a more complex game than just having T10. Just instead of having T20, have a T10 competition. If you're really concerned that kids have no attention span, bearing in mind, at the age of 3, 4 years old, I was happily watching test matches on the TV for a whole day's play and watch a 5-day test match, and I wouldn't miss a single ball. It's just mad. No, I think one of the bigger cover-ups was in sport was probably Lance Armstrong. The fact he got away with cheating for over a decade. That for me would be a bigger one. The fact he outed himself rather than be outed is something else. But I think the biggest cover-up in sports, possibly the Major League Baseball steroids for 20 years. They got away with it, or Lance Armstrong doping scandal. The only reason why they came to light was an ex-Major League Baseball player came clean and admitted, and Lance Armstrong came clean and admitted. The fact that they only came to light after said person retired is really damning. But there's been plenty of cover-ups in sport, plenty of corruption scandals that we just don't know about that have been covered up or pushed back down the agenda. Because again, PR and sport, the image that is projected is vitally important. As soon as that image is damaged, it's way. But anyway, I'm going to have to leave that there. I've got to have to take a phone call. It's been really interesting. A lot of the questions. I'm straight talking. I'm blunt. I'm to the point. I don't wishy-washy with the everyone's a winner bullshit and all that PC crap. I really can't stand it. Like, I'd rather people were straight talking. You don't have to agree with my opinion. Not everyone does. You don't have to agree with the opinions that I have and my views. But I think at the end of the day, there's too much not direct answers of questions. And this is an issue. Sport, they're very evasive in questioning. In the NHL, for example, they don't say it's a dislocated shoulder. They say an upper body injury. They don't say, oh, it's a torn knee ligament. It's a lower body injury. Just tell it what it is, because it will just reduce the speculation. It's done. It's dusted. The media are happy. The fans know what's going on. It's pretty obvious when the player went off injured with a dislocated shoulder what he's actually injured. But I just prefer straight talking. I'm getting very tired of these coached press conferences where the coaches, the players, the team owners, they've been coached in media and how to answer questions by being evasive. Just be straight talking. I prefer straight talking answers and straight talking players who just say it how it is. And the leagues now find them for being straight talking. It's bizarre. I like characters in sport. It's what makes sport fun. And so at the moment, there's too many too many robots that have no emotion. And it's just like, no, just show that emotion. Show that you're frustrated. Show that you're happy. Show that you're angry. Don't be a PC robotic. It's just it doesn't add anything. It's dull. But there you go. I'm going to leave that there. I've got to make a phone call. Thank you very much for all your questions. I know this has been a shorter one than planned. Please, obviously, once the stream's done, check out other videos. There's a couple of videos up on the channel. I want to hear your feedback, and I will have some more videos and some videos I'm doing tomorrow on Cameron Smith in the NRL and Jared Croker in the NRL. Jared Croker, record try and point scorer for Canberra over the weekend, record try scorer now, and Cameron Smith, just the record appearance holder in rugby league in Australia, although not all time. So that's an interesting one. Cameron Smith has got a ways to go to beat some players on records of appearances, but in the NRL era, he is a record holder as well, and I don't think that is broken anytime soon. So there's a couple of videos on them, and there's a few other videos and a few other bits and pieces that will be coming in the next few days around of more of a historical or future looking. Let's see who's going to win next season or who's in the best position to win, and we'll do some history videos as well. But thank you very much for watching, and I'll have some more videos for you very, very soon.